Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel. I just did this actually, which I'm quite pleased about how simple it was. So I'll show you that. In some games, be able to run around and kind of shift screens like this. And this is a really simple way of doing it that's quite customizable, which may help. So let's have a look at that. So I've got this ground piece, just so I can actually visually tell that something's happening. And I'll bring in a character over here, and the main idea is there's a block that follows with the character but only snaps to the nearest kind of grid space for these different screens. So say we've got one screen here and one screen here, then as the character moves across a boundary between them, then this will suddenly move over to there, because that will be the nearest spot it can go to. So we need a block on a grid that will go to that spot, and then we'll have a camera on here. So if we have that, just snap there, and I'll go add a camera in, and I can just adjust this to, this will be where if you imagine that's where the center of the screen is, then we don't want it to be able to see everything. We just want to see it this area and have it roughly in the center of that. Yeah, now we need to have a tag in here, and that cube will follow this tag but in kind of a funny way. So we don't need to name it, we just need a tag, and in here we need a follower, and that will move to the tag, even though it doesn't have names, because this is unnamed and that's unnamed. It kind of matches each other. So we'll up the damping and strength and speed, or you can have these lower if you want it to have a nice kind of smooth transition or something. But we won't actually be using this tag, and that's why I don't need these names or anything. We're going to use this tag to just know where the puppet is, and then mess with the position of where the puppet is so that it snaps to a grid, this special grid we're going to make, and then feeds that into the follower. So let's go and start messing with that. So we'll have, I'll just have a chip where we'll hide all of our logic, and then we'll have an output node on the right hand side, and that will send our position into the follower, into the target position. So if we just used the scene space transform of the tag and sent that, it will be doing exactly the same thing. And we need to make it non-visible and non-collidable. It will be doing the same thing, but it actually bypasses things like the minimum distance and maximum distance, because that just says what range of area it can look for tags, but we don't need to look for tags because we're being told what position we need to go to, so that's fine. So we'd actually want to mess with this value first though. So first we need to get the actual position out of this instead of the transform. So if we use a splitter and wire that in, you can see it has lots of different colors, and that's lots of different values coming out through a single fat wire. So we can use a splitter gadget to split those out into their different values. So we can get a position and a rotation or orientation and a scale. And then if we split the position again, we have A, B and C, which corresponds to X, Y and Z axes of the world, things like that. So again, if we use that position, it would be going to the puppet's position. But we don't want that, we still want to mess with it some more. So I've been through this before in another tutorial, which you might want to look up, but we'll be using calculators and stuff to round it off. This is how we're going to lock it to this grid that we're going to make up. So we need to split this, because I'm going to, instead of rounding it to a grid that's even, so if you look at the normal grid, then it's even, it's all like squares, you see that? But we're going to make it so that instead of it having a square kind of orientation, we're going to make it slightly wider than it is tall, because that's the aspect ratio of the screen, like this. But that will be completely adjustable by you, the creator. So the first step is to have a slider. This will be for the X size of the grid. Cool, and we want to multiply the X coordinate we have for the player by this, by the inverse of it or something. First we need to turn this into something more useful. So if we have like a larger range. So this is how many meters or grid points across it is before it snaps to the next one. So if we're just going to be at 7, but you can have like any number you want, even decimal places will work. We want to divide 1 divided by this number, and that gives us kind of a scale to mess with this in. So we want to multiply it by that, and then round it, and then divide it again by that same number. So we get back to our original, like, actual real world scene scale. So I'll just wire this B into that, so it's the same number, and then we'll take the rounded number and divide it by that. So divide by. Cool. And I'll just use that for now so we can see how that works. So I want to turn this back into a position, so I'll use a combiner and put it into 3 numbers mode. So remember, this corresponds to X, Y, and Z. So I'll wire the X that we've messed with and the Z that we haven't messed with into here, and then output that so that the follower uses it. So now that snaps to it, but you can see it's not perfectly on the player. And as we move around, so I'll just turn off this camera and make this visible so we can see it in play mode or playtest mode. So moving forwards and backwards on the Z axis, it's keeping up perfectly, but left and right, it kind of snaps to these different points, and it like suddenly snapped over there, suddenly snapped over there. And if we give this a smaller number, it will snap to smaller grid points instead of large grid points. So like that's the size of the grid that we're working with on the x-axis. So we'll actually probably want it to be quite large. And this will depend on how zoomed out the camera is. So yeah, if I just do that, and I'll add a mark here. So that's one mark, and then as I move over here, that's another mark. The left side of the cube again, and now I'll just move this into roughly the middle, and then I'll adjust this so that those are kind of the edges, like maybe around there. And if this was like looking straight down, then it would look like that. Cool. So now let's put that. Now let's turn that camera on again. And because it's in a chip, it won't matter if the player is off the screen, it'll still look into that camera. So, like that. So we probably want it to be a little bit further out, maybe. There you go. So now as we get to the edge of the screen, it kind of shifts across. And now we'll do the same thing for the Z, and it will have exactly the same setup. So and this is the Z size, and this will be smaller because that's the up down on the screen, and we'll put the Z into here, Z into here, and put that into the position, and now that's locking to there. Cool. So it looks like it's a bit small. Oh yeah, that's a problem as well. So make sure the cube is around the center. Cool. So we'll probably want to make that a bit taller, that value. So I guess it's 16 by 9, right? TV. So if we set this to 16, set this to 9, it will probably be a bit too exact, but it should work. Yeah, seems to work. Cool. So now we have like perfectly gridded stuff with exactly the same like ratio to the TV, and if we want it to change just a little earlier so that we're not like cut off right on the edge of the screen, just zoom out a bit. Like that. And you will notice, because we're using a follower, there's a little bit of delay. So like you can see like maybe there's one frame of in between stuff, which may not be ideal, but you could even accentuate it and work with it by just having a slightly slower speed sort of thing. So if you want this kind of transition, you can just adjust it like that. Very easy. And this could work exactly the same way if this whole thing was on its side like that and it was like a side scroller jumping around. It would work exactly the same. You just use the Y instead of the Z, but it's just easier to set up a scene we could run around if it was flat like that. And so there you go. And as I say, there's a tutorial. It'll be on Patreon first, but there'll be a tutorial of this on there too, going into the depth of why this works, this rounding logic. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to learn something new every day.